Puckett, and today I'm going to inform you about the history of American fashion. Fashion has evolved so much over the last century. From the early 1900s to the mid-1900s to the present day, the styles have drastically changed. Fashion has, of course, always been around. The styles in America change so often that it is difficult to keep up with what the newest trends are. According to Schmoop.com, fashion originated in America in the late 1600s. Clothing was scarce in America, so clothes were shipped over from Europe. Since that time, styles of clothes have evolved drastically. Let's skip to the 20th century, though. From 1900 to 1920 was considered the haute couture era. According to randomhistory.com, during this time, women's fashion highlighted the physique of the full-figured woman. Low busts and curvy hips were highlighted by the styles of dresses in this era. At the beginning of the decade, skirts were full, long, and often had a small train, kind of like what we see in modern-day wedding gowns. As the decade came to an end, the skirts became shorter and the shape of dresses changed too. They became more of a straight fit. From the time of 1910 to 1914, the shape of dresses became even slimmer. These styles emphasized flatter busts and slimmer hips. Trains on dresses also became less popular. The time period of 1920 to 1940 was called the modern era of fashion. During the 20s, women started to free themselves from constricting clothes and became more open to the idea of pants and short skirts. Popular styles remained pretty modest until around 1925. During this time, short skirts and low waistlines became popular. This was called the flapper era. Dresses during this time were made to fit tight. Hems were cut to the knee and waistlines disappeared almost completely. The flapper styles lasted through the 20s and into the early 30s before the Great Depression forced trends to become more conservative. During this time, skirts grew longer and the natural waistline became more important in dresses as society moved back to a traditional girly look. From 1940 to 1960, World War II not only took a toll on the economy, but also on the fashion. Plainness and uniformity in clothing was embraced and people had to make do with what they already had. Military uniforms were often seen on both men and women everywhere, even at things like social events. During the war, even things like clothing were rationed. Women received a limited number of ration coupons for clothing purchases each year. This number declined as the war waged on. Since the materials of this time period were limited, the popular styles of this era included shorter skirts and short boxy jackets. It's hard to believe that even things such as buttons were scarce. There was a limit of 3 buttons per clothing item in that time. By the late 1940s and early 50s, designers had grown weary of the boring clothing styles of the past few years and longed for elegance and luxury in fashion. A new look of fashion began to emerge in the late 1940s. Styles included rounded shoulders, full skirts, and narrow waists. The clothing was often lined with expensive fabric and elaborate accessories were must-haves. The time period of the 1960s to 1980s was considered the fashion revolution. The explosion of youth completely changed the fashion system of that time period. Before 1960, designers created clothing for runways and clothing manufacturers mass-produced the styles for the general public. However, in the 60s, the youth in America began to rebel against traditional styles and created their own trends. In the 60s and 70s, all kinds of new styles became popular. A few examples were bell-bottoms, very short miniskirts, and hot pants and jeans. It was no longer frowned upon for women to wear pants on a day-to-day basis. By the late 70s, the choices of clothing available were very diverse. The popular styles have become a bit more conservative than the past several years during this time. During the 60s and 70s, the appeal of high fashion had declined greatly, but with the 1980s came a rise in the popularity of designer styles. Power and money dominated the styles of the 80s. Women wore expensive business suits and dresses during the day and gowns in the evening. Not everyone could afford the high fashion styles, but some top designers like Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren produced ready-to-wear lines to appeal to the general public. By the 1990s, women were no longer interested in the expensive styles of the 80s and settled for more comfortable, casual clothing. Ripped jeans and flannel shirts inspired by the popular grunge music styles became popular, while the increasingly popular hip music phase brought baggy pants into style. Comfort was key from women from the 1990s to 2000. Even the styles for work became more relaxed. Casual dresses and pants became popular workplace attire. Today, expensive designer clothing is still desired by some women, but more casual, comfortable clothing styles at reasonable prices are the popular choice for most women. The popular styles of fashion are so rapidly changing, so who knows what the popular styles might look like 10 years from now. Thank you.